Welcome. It's always that exciting start to the webinar as people start coming on in. And let's see who we have so far. Oh, I see Angelica, Luis, Sade, Pritamal. Hi, Riley, Soliana, Marie, Mary, Layla, Alejandro, Adriana. So glad so many of you are here with us this evening. Who else is here? Jenna, Hannah, Vincent, Jesse. We have a big crew registered for this evening, so we'll give it another minute. Hi, Amy. Great to see you. Cassidy, Amaya, Caleb, Fawaz, Michaela, Sorry. Again, just thrilled to have you here. And I think we'll go ahead and get started because your time is precious and you might be working on finishing up your QuestBridge supplements or working on, your homework in your senior year. So we want to be sure to get to as many of your questions as possible while respecting your time. But first, I'd like to say good evening, good afternoon, depending on what time zone you're zooming in from. My name is Moira Poe. My pronouns are she, her. I'm one of the senior associate directors here in the Yale Undergraduate Admissions Office, and I'm just thrilled that you are joining us for this QuestBridge Finalist Q&A. It's really an overview of the application pathways for QuestBridge Finalists and some advice about the application process too. We'll talk a little bit about Yale throughout this, but even before we begin, let's get to know who is here. So let's start off with the poll related to geography. Where are you coming from? Where do you live? Or better yet, where are you zooming in from? And also, what's the size of your high school? My high school would have been squarely in that my graduating class would have been squarely in that 500 to 999 students. There were 731 of us, but since grown. Oh, it's a pretty even split just about of school sizes in different regions. I see someone's zooming in from abroad. Welcome. You could see the geographic diversity in here also. We'll give it maybe another 10 seconds or so. It looks like most people have answered. Okay. And let's share the results. And you can see where everyone's coming from and the school size. And what about another poll with goals for the session? Goals for the session. So what do you want to make sure we cover? We have a lot of great questions that you submitted. And if you see me looking to the left or right, I have multiple screens up on my laptop to make sure we have some of your questions available, some that were pre-submitted. There might be some live Q&A that comes in as well. But some of you want to know about application pathways, okay? How Yale reviews QB applications, oh, we'll absolutely talk about that. The match ranking process and what happens if I don't match to Yale. Financial aid forms and process, and the questionnaire and other supplements. Okay, we can answer a whole lot of questions about all of this. We'll give it another couple of seconds. Okay, and we're sharing your results so you can get an idea of what we are going to cover. So this is wonderful. We have an incredible range of students that are here, and more students and maybe student supporters, whether those are family members or counselors, may end up joining us throughout this session. And we will try to answer as many questions as we can for you. There will be contact information in our last slide as well. And many of you have already been in touch if there's a question on your mind. We want to make sure you are getting the information you need to confidently apply to Yale, whether it's through the QuestBridge College National College Match or applying early action or regular decision. We are recording this session. I just want to make sure you are all aware of that, and we will actually send out this recording within the next couple of days. So to To let you know what our agenda looks like, we're going to skip to the next slide. Some brief introduction. So, again, my name is Maura Poe, and I'm joined by three of my incredible colleagues on the back end. I'm joined by Corinne, Julia, and Becky, who will be helping me answer so many questions as they come in. We will talk briefly about the Yale Quest Scholars Network. Who are our Questies on campus? What do they do? And maybe you've met some of them if you attended one of our earlier sessions earlier this fall with our Yale Quest Scholars Network. I will answer a lot of frequently asked questions. We got a lot of wonderful questions that were submitted in advance, but there are going to be questions that are asked throughout the presentation too. So that's why we will be getting to some of those in live Q&A. And then we'll talk a little bit about advice in the Yale process. So you likely know that there are 48 QuestBridge partners at this point, and students can rank up to 15 if they are participating in the National College Match process. One piece of advice that I will always recommend students do is I'm going to speak generally about Yale. If you have questions about the match process at another QuestBridge school, I'm going to encourage you to make sure you reach out to that school to get the information that you need to know. I will talk a little bit about Yale's community and campus and academics, just in case some of you aren't as familiar, but I will also highly encourage you to check out our admissions website for additional events. We have a lot of different virtual events, whether they are information sessions that give you a really good overview of Yale's community. We also have virtual student forums too, and virtual tours that you are able to participate in. There are actually, I think, 6 different virtual tours you can do at this point. So you get a real sense of what Yale's campus is like. So let's start by talking about the Quest Scholars at Yale and who the Quest Scholars are. Last year, over 160 QuestBridge finalists were admitted for the class of 2026, and 81 of them actually matched with Yale. Just looking at those numbers, though, and this is something you're likely going to hear me say multiple times, you can see that not all of our Quest Bridge students were admitted through the match. The match is not the end all be all at all. Not only that, but the Quest Bridge program is an incredible program. We're wonderful partners and really enjoy the fact that we participate in the Quest Bridge program. But know that Yale's financial aid policies for undergraduates are the same, regardless of whether you apply through QuestBridge or you apply using the Common Application or the Coalition application. We'll talk more about financial aid in a bit. There are over 400 Quest Scholars on campus, and many of them are a part of our Quest Scholars Network. In fact, our Quest Scholars Network, they're coordinating right now the annual Quest Day that will celebrate our Quest Scholars on campus. Our Quest Scholars are coming from just about every state you can imagine in the country, similar to our incoming student body. Our Quest Scholars are pursuing any of our 80 plus majors that we have in Yale College. And just to be clear, all of our undergraduates are a part of Yale College. So it doesn't matter what major a student thinks they're going to pursue. All undergraduates apply to Yale College, and all undergraduates, all about 6,500 of them, are a part of this liberal arts college. Now, some questions have come in already about, well, what supports does Yale offer for first generation low income students, for students of color? And something that you will hear often about Yale's community is that if you want the resources, if you're willing to look for the resources, they are absolutely there for you. You do have the support of the Quest Scholars Network, and many of our Questies on campus are a part of it. But you also have organizations like the Community Initiative for First Generation Low Income Students that brings together students from across Yale College and has everything from mentorship to workshops to partnering with the Poorview Center for Teaching and Learning. The Poorview Center for Teaching and Learning is a main hub and has a lot of resources like academic success workshops. And academic success can come in all manners of speaking, whether that's thinking about time management, whether those are workshops related to, well, how do you read for a class that has hundreds of pages of reading for any given week. And those workshops are open to students. The Porvoo Center for Teaching and Learning also has everything from writing tutors, and writing tutors are embedded in the residential colleges too. They also have undergraduate learning assistants that are able to help with tutoring, especially for many of our STEM courses. There are a lot of resources for students to pursue, not even when they're struggling, but even from day one. That's something that I always like to encourage students. Make sure you're using tutors. Make sure you're going to using the writing tutors to help with drafts. It's not a matter of, well, do I only use them when I'm struggling? It's, hey, I use this as a part of my day to day academic success. And we always encourage students to do that. There are also four standalone cultural centers on campus. The Afro American Cultural Center just celebrated its 50th anniversary last year. The Asian American Cultural Center is one of only 30 standalone Asian American cultural centers around the country. La Casa Cultural is our Latinx cultural center, and the Native American Cultural Center. These are hubs that have their own professional staff. Each one has a Yale College dean attached to it, as well as an assistant director. They're responsible for programming, they're responsible for overseeing the house, and each house has a lot of different student organizations that are connected to it. There are even peer liaisons that are connected to each of our cultural centers who will reach out to incoming first year students as informal or formal mentors, as someone that they can connect with if they so choose. There's advising resources embedded in the residential colleges too. Our for entering first year students, there's a reason why our first year retention rate is so high. 98%, because there's so much advising that's embedded within the residential colleges, within the cultural centers, within the Porvoo Center for Teaching and Learning, and we make sure that we are normalizing using these different resources. So next, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Quest Match process itself and just the different pathways of applying to Yale, because we've received a lot of questions about this. Well, what do I do? Will applying through the match or EA or RD change my chances or eligibility for admissions and financially? So just to be clear, QuestBridge finalists are able to apply to Yale using the QuestBridge application. They're able to apply to Yale if they've decided to rank us for the QuestBridge match. They can use the QuestBridge application. They can actually, if you're a non-ranking finalist, you can use the QuestBridge application to apply early action or regular decision as well. Now, if you choose, if you're a non-ranking finalist, so you're not ranking any schools, but you decide to apply to Yale early action, know that you are held to the non-binding. So even if you get admitted in December, you have until the end, until May 1 to tell us if you're coming. But we are a single choice early action school, meaning if a student chooses to apply to Yale early action, we are the only private institution to which they are pursuing an early application. So students are able in early action to still absolutely apply to public institutions that have non-binding early action programs. And part of the reason for that is because a lot of public institutions will have scholarships that are tied into how early a student may or may not apply. So we want students to be able to pursue that. Students can even use the QuestBridge application to apply regular decision. And a few things to know about, well, if you're admitted, when you're admitted, how binding it might be. If you choose to rank Yale and you're participating in the National College Match, know that if you are matched with Yale, congratulations, that's amazing. It is a binding match. Just about every QuestBridge partner at this point is a binding school. I think there's only one school at this point that's not a binding match. So if you are admitted, you're committed to coming to Yale. Your other QuestBridge applications will get withdrawn, but you also do need to withdraw your applications if you have any, say, regular decision applications out there. Again, that's if you match to Yale. If you apply early action, I already mentioned it's non-binding. If you are admitted, you have until the May 1 national deadline to tell us if you're coming to Yale. And that's the same with regular decision. Now, what happens if you're not admitted? As a QuestBridge match, if you're not admitted, hey, and you don't match with anyone else, no problem. We just defer your application to regular decision. So, and let me see. Give me 1 second. I just want to make sure I didn't realize we didn't have the closed captioning on. So I want to see if we can get that on for you. And I'll ask one of my colleagues to dig into it to see if we can get the closed captioning going or not. Apologies in advance if we are not able to get that up. But with the QuestBridge match, if a student is not admitted, that's okay. We just defer them. We're able to consider those students as long as they didn't match with another school. We're able to consider those students in regular decision. Now, keep in mind for the QuestBridge match, we can only match with students who have a zero parent share. And we've received a few questions. Well, what happens if using the net price calculator, it looks like my EFC or it looks like my parent share might be a little bit higher? What I would say is one, know that we can only match with students who have that zero parent share, but I wouldn't self select out because the net price calculator and the quick cost estimator are both exactly that. They're estimators. Our financial aid office, and there is a slide about financial aid later on, they will ultimately determine if you are zero parent share. But again, if a student's not admitted during the QuestBridge match, we're able to defer them to regular decision. If a non-ranking finalist applies early action and they're not admitted, there are two different decisions that you can get. You can either be deferred, meaning we will continue to consider your application in regular decision, or we may end up, unfortunately, saying no to a student that we're not going to offer them admission. Even students that are deferred, though, they're going to be considered in regular decision with the full pool in regular decision. But look at this, the financial aid, full need, no loans. If a student applies during regular decision, they can either get an admit offer, and again, completely non-binding, still have until that May 1 national deadline to tell us if they're coming, still have time to compare different financial aid packages, and you're able, and we hope you'll decide to join us at Yale. But of course, it is always about an academic and social and financial fit. You want to make sure you're thinking about that trifecta as you're considering schools. A student applying regular decision, if they're not admitted, they might also be denied, or they might even be waitlisted, meaning we'll say, you know what, we're not able to admit you at the end of March, but after May 1, we'll see if there's still room in the class, and we'll see if we are able to admit you at that time. You'll notice something that's common, that financial aid for admitted students, it's always that it's full need without loans. Loans are not a part of our financial aid packages. So the big question that tends to come up, will applying through the match or EA or RD change my chances, increase my chances or my eligibility for admissions or financial aid? It's about what works best for you. And November 1 is coming up pretty quickly. I even tell students only apply for November 1 if you think you're going to be ready on or before the deadline with an application that you feel best represents you. But do what's right for you. We have students who might have thought about, you know what, I wasn't going to match, but now I am. And we have sent out emails about how you can update your application to be included in the match if you are a non-ranking match at this point. But know that we do not advantage or disadvantage students if they're doing the match versus EA versus RD. There's no statistical advantage doing one over the other. Now we had a question, and this has come up for a couple of years, and I think it's worth answering now. Would the pandemic or the effects of the pandemic impact how many QuestBridge students we match or admit with our financial aid? It does not, because we've actually been not only need blinded our admissions for over 50 years, but we've been committed to meeting 100% of demonstrated need for our incoming first year students for years. So the pandemic does not affect our financial aid packages, how many students we match. We've only been really increasing the number of students we match, and we kind of go with where the pool takes us. Another question that's here: when will QuestBridge finalists applying through EA hear from Yale about their portal or about decisions? If a student decides to apply early action, they will get a confirmation email about setting up their application status portal, and that will give your reference ID number, that will give information about how you can upload updates. And those emails are starting to come out once we get your application from QuestBridge. Decisions are released around mid-December for early action. For QuestBridge, match day is December 1, and that's when students will hear. So we'll go to the next slide to talk about the QB match process. So let's talk a little bit about, well, what happens on December 1st. So I always like talking about what happens with the match. So you ranked your schools, and QuestBridge has those rankings. We do not see those rankings. A couple of questions have come up in terms of, well, do schools see how we've ranked them? And one question that I've already answered this year: do schools know how many schools we're even ranking? We do not see any of that information. That all lives with QuestBridge. But what we do is we go through our admissions process. We are already starting to read applications. We are starting to take notes on our applications. And in a couple of weeks, we will have our QuestBridge Match committee. A few of us will be in the committee room, and we will make decisions about who the students are with who we want to match. And what we do is financial aid helps us out. They let us know if a student is zero parent share, so they are eligible for the match. And then we send our list off to QuestBridge. Just like you're waiting eagerly to see if you match with a school, we're actually waiting eagerly to see if students match with us, because again, we do not see where students rankings where student has ranked Yale. We hope you've all ranked Yale high, but it's again about that academic, social, and financial fit. Eventually, QuestBridge will release to you the school that you've matched with, and they'll let us know who our matches are. December 1st is a really exciting day. And what we end up telling students once they match is, congratulations on matching with Yale. A whole lot more information is going to come out right around when we release our early action decisions too. But we make sure that our QuestBridge matches have that early information. If a student, again, doesn't match and doesn't match anywhere, we let students know, hey, no problem. We can't wait to continue to consider you in the full regular decision pool. If a student does match elsewhere, even if it's a student that we really were hoping we could match with, unless that is the one non-binding school, that student's application will be withdrawn from Yale's consideration, because you found a fantastic home that's eager to welcome you at their during the end of the summer, and we will wish you all the best. So those are the different options. Next, let's talk a little bit about next steps. What do you have to do? What are these next steps for Yale? You likely received multiple emails from our office last week, probably 2 to 3. One inviting you to this session, one confirming that we have your QuestBridge application, and then one very important email that gives you not just confirmation information, but it gives you your Yale reference ID number. It gives you information about activating your application status portal, and it gives you other information to know, like deadlines for financial aid. For instance, the deadline to submit financial aid forms for the QB match is November 4th. That application status portal is going to be your key to making sure your documents are here, to even checking your financial aid documents, because there will be a financial aid checklist in there where you can see, are all of my documents here. Please, if you have been dragging your feet on activating your application status portal, please go in and do that tonight. Please go in. I'm just going to repeat it. Go in and do that tonight, because not only can you check the status of your application materials, but you will then have access to a couple of additional forms that we need for you to fill out so we can consider your application. There's the testing choice form. And this is a question that we've also received often. Well, can I send in my testing after November 1? We can't guarantee that we will get it in time for consideration, but you can arrange for it to be sent to us if you choose if you want Yale to consider your testing in the application process. But please keep in mind, we continue to be test optional for students entering in the fall of 2023. It is ultimately your choice, but you have to tell us what your choice is. That's what the testing choice form is. It is you saying to us, yes, Yale, I would like you to consider my testing, or no, Yale, I do not want you to consider my testing. If you don't fill out that testing choice form, we're not going to assume that you want us to consider your testing. We will not be able to consider it unless you opt in. So make sure you go into the application status portal to fill out the testing choice form. There's also then the QuestBridge questionnaire that has a couple of additional questions that we want you to answer for us. And these are some similar questions to what we ask on the Common Application or the Coalition application. Questions like, you can choose up to 3 academic areas, and we're not holding you to those academic areas. Students, it doesn't matter if you try to indicate the same major 3 times, students come in undecided to Yale College. But we do ask you to list up to 3 academic areas that might be of interest to you. And we ask you, hey, what about those areas interest you? We also ask a couple of other questions to get to know you a little bit better. A question that's come up a few times is, well, how important is the QuestBridge questionnaire? I always say to students, each part of the application adds to the picture of who are you. Tell We learn about your love of learning. We learn about what's been meaningful to you. We learn about different ways that you might be able to really engage in our campus community. And the QuestBridge questionnaire for Yale helps us to even understand that a little bit further. You may have other schools that have their own supplemental questions, and keep in mind that every school decides what questions they're going to ask on their questionnaire. You can get a real sense for a school's campus community and what things they value based on the additional questions that they're asking, because we want to know these things about you. So I would very much highly recommend that you take some time to think about your answers to the QuestBridge questionnaire, just like you would any of your other written pieces. Think of it this way: the written parts of the application are the only parts of the application where you decide what we get to learn about you, right? Just about every other part of the application comes from somewhere else. Related to the application, sometimes you might go into your application status portal and there might be a missing document and you will see a red X there. So a question that comes up is, where can I submit updates, or where can educators submit materials? If you are submitting your own updates, if there's additional information you want us to know or something that's new, you can actually upload those updates through your personal application status portal. You're able to click on, I believe it's on the right-hand side, it's an application update link, and then you can indicate what kind of update it is. For teachers, for counselors, where maybe a document did not come through for one reason or another, we do have what's known as the application material upload form for educators that your counselors can use, that your teachers can use. Make sure that before you send the link, and the link will likely drop in the chat right now, make sure if you share that with one of your teachers or counselors that you're giving your Yale ID number to them as well, so they can enter that on the form. And what that does is we are able to just download that form once it's uploaded to us, and we are able to add those materials. I say give it a couple of days, because as you can imagine, a lot of materials are coming in right now, and we want to make sure that we are matching materials correctly. But that's the beauty of the application status portal. It gives you the opportunity to look and really take ownership of the process to say, does Yale have all the information that they need? Another question that comes up is, oh, well, you want to get to know me better. Uh, do I need to submit a common application or a coalition application also, or should I upload additional essays? Y'all, you have done so much writing for us already through the QuestBridge application, through the QuestBridge questionnaire. That will suffice. Do not, please do not, if you are applying using your QuestBridge application, do not submit an additional common application or coalition application. Your QuestBridge application is your application. For non-ranking finalists, again, non-ranking finalists, and they've received information about this, they do have the opportunity to use the QuestBridge application or the common application or the coalition application because they're not doing the match process. But your chances are better if you apply early action versus regular decision. It's really you do you. You apply at the time that you see fit. A question that we get asked often, often we say we're test optional. Are we really test optional? Look at this testing choice form, right? It is a choice. It is up to you. If you say took an SAT and ACT and you feel like I really want Yale to know about this score, okay, send it on in. We will absolutely use it. If you've taken it and you feel like I don't know if this represents what I want to share or if I'm comfortable sharing it. Again, you do you. There are so many parts of the application that are part of our whole person review that if the testing is there, we'll use it. If the testing is not there, we won't use it. There's a lot of information in there that we can use to really think about your academic preparation, to think about your academic trajectory, but you have to take that first step of filling out that testing choice form. Now, we've received a couple of questions about unofficial transcripts. Your counselors should be submitting your transcripts to us through the application upload form. It is official if it comes from your counselor through the application upload form. If your transcript is marked as received from your QuestBridge application, we are all set. We don't need your counselor to upload a second transcript or a third transcript just in case. You are all set. Finally, can you submit updates or extra letters of recommendation? This question comes up often as well. And the application status portal has that upload tool and that update tool where if there are significant updates that you think our admissions committee should know or your admissions officer should know, go for it. For an additional letter of recommendation, if you feel that there is someone else, in addition to your two core academic recommendations and your school recommendation, if you feel, well, I have this mentor or I have this supervisor who wants to not only write this letter of recommendation for me, but they're going to provide information that the Yale Admissions Committee will not learn anywhere else. You know what? That person can absolutely submit that supplemental recommendation, whether it's using the material upload tool or faxing or mailing in the recommendation to us. But sometimes there's an assumption that more is obviously better. I should just send all the recommendations in the world. We are humans. You are seeing me. I'm a human. My three colleagues on the back end of this presentation are humans, and we're going to read everything. If you're going to submit something that's additional, make sure, again, it's going to give information we can't learn anywhere else because it's a lot of reading, and we want to make sure that we have the time to give every application its due. So those are next steps for Yale. What about interviews? And maybe some of you have heard, whether through Reddit or heard from friends or classmates who have gone through the QuestBridge process, that there's the possibility of an interview. And just know that interviews throughout the Yale admissions process, they remain optional. Whether a student applies for the QuestBridge Match, or a student applies early action, or a student applies regular decision, the interview is an optional part of the application process. And it's meant to be a conversation, whether it's with a Yale alumni interviewer during early action or regular decision, or it's with one of our senior interviewers that's a current student who helps us to interview applicants. Interviews for QuestBridge finalists who are participating in the match typically happen, if they happen, in the coming weeks, in the next couple of weeks. A student doesn't have to opt into an interview. So I don't want you to think, oh my gosh, do I need to sign up for one? The interview is an opportunity for us to get more information if we need it. And the interviewer will always reach out to the student to see, hey, are you available for an interview for the match? It's typically over Zoom. So I don't want you to worry about, oh my gosh, I don't live anywhere near Yale. How am I supposed to get in and meet? If a student is applying early action or regular decision, again, if an interview is offered, and again, they are optional, it's it's going to be up to the student this year to decide, am I comfortable with an in-person interview or am I comfortable with a virtual interview? And then we can match students with alumni interviewers in the area. But know that the absence of an interview in the admissions process is not the end all be all, because we may have a limited number of interview slots available. And then if a student, say, applies in the match and then gets deferred to regular decision, we have other opportunities for students to interview if they did not have an interview during the match process. Keep in mind the interview continues to be just one small part of this whole person review. It's by no means the end all be all. Now, we've talked a bunch about financial aid, and I want to make sure we take some time for students to know about our financial aid information. So there are a couple of financial aid documents that are required, whether you are applying through the match, you're applying early action, or you're applying regular decision. And we have a couple of links for you, starting with even just our main financial aid office. They have so much information, so many resources, everything from deadlines to links to the FAFSA and the CSS profile and the different documents that are required. You can see that the required documents are typically the FAFSA, the CSS profile, and the family's tax returns from 2021. So it's going to be prior year. A question that comes up, can supplemental documents, including financial aid or recommendations, come in after November 1st? The deadline for financial aid documents for the match is November 4th. So as close to November 4th as we can get those documents in, please make sure we are getting those documents in. Supplemental recommendations and things like that may come in after November 1. And as things come in, we will continue to add them to a student's application. But keep in mind that the match process is a faster timeline than even early action or regular decision. So we do have a finite amount of time that we will be able to consider a student for the QuestBridge match. If we don't have all the information that we need, again, if the student doesn't match anywhere else, we are able to roll that student into regular decision. Now, there are fee waivers that are available for the CSS profile, and the financial aid website actually has some direct links to not just the FAFSA and the CSS profile, but even direct links to things like how you can get a fee waiver for the CSS profile. There are many of them available. If you need to submit non-custodial parent information, there are ways that you can fill that out as well too. There is a non-custodial parent waiver petition that a student can fill out using one of the financial aid forms that will be available on our financial aid website. So please make sure that you are using that. We get questions about how students can upload things like their tax returns, how they can upload things like, proof of income. And I'll talk briefly about what happens if, say, your family doesn't submit tax returns or doesn't have the ability to submit tax returns. Make sure there is a link to the College Board's IDOC service, and a lot of those forms get uploaded directly through the IDOC service, including the tax forms, including non-custodial parent waivers, but also including if your family, let's say your family is undocumented or documented, and your family does not submit tax forms, you can either do a tax non-filing statement. That is a form that is available on our financial aid website. You can also say upload if your family isn't able to provide tax forms. They are able to submit documentation of the family's income. It might be a letter from the employer that also can get uploaded, whether through the IDOC service. There's even an upload tool from Student Financial Services that you can use too. To remind people, do we only match with zero EFC? We only can match with students where we find that there is a zero parent share. And we want to make sure we have the information that we need to determine, is it truly a zero parent share? I will say our colleagues at Student Financial Services are fantastic with following up with students as they are able to. They are doing financial aid for a lot of different students. So please make sure you are helping them out and getting those forms in a timely manner. Now, a question that comes in, does financial aid remain the same all 4 years? It won't remain the same, but it won't remain the same for a very good reason. We meet 100% of demonstrated need. We meet that full need without loans. The cost of attendance typically goes up every year, right? So we want to make sure that if the cost of attendance is going up, that we continue to meet that 100% of demonstrated need. So students on campus will annually submit the CSS profile, the FAFSA, the tax forms. I will also say to students that if every family situation is different, and occasionally something might happen during the school year where suddenly the income is very different. Unfortunately, maybe it's job loss, maybe it's medical costs. And I always recommend that students reach out directly to financial aid, even as their current students, to make sure that financial aid is aware of those changes, to see if there are any adjustments that need to be made to their to financial aid packages. A question that, oh my goodness, I feel like we've answered this so many times on the CSS profile. What round do you indicate? Do we indicate early decision? Do we indicate regular decision? And I was talking to our director of undergraduate financial aid the other day and said, Scott Wallace Judas is our director of undergraduate financial aid. Does it matter what round a student? And he cut me off. He said, it does not matter what round a student indicates on the CSS profile, because what we will ultimately do, Student Financial Services will be able to pull the CSS profile regardless of if you indicated early decision or regular decision. So please do not worry about that. There's a question of, what if the CSS profile and the FAFSA are not available on time on November 1? Again, keep in mind that the financial aid deadline for match candidates is November 4th. What should undocumented students do for financial aid documents? And there's some information on our financial aid website about this as well. But if a family isn't submitting those tax forms, again, you can submit a statement of income. Maybe it's a letter from an employer. Maybe it's a statement that comes from somewhere else. But it's not a matter of, oh my gosh, if a student is undocumented or documented, that we're not able to meet 100% of their demonstrated need. That's absolutely not the case at all. Make sure, and I know there are a lot of questions and there are a lot of links that are here. Make sure you are checking out, as much as you are checking out our admissions website and all of the advice and questions that we answer on the admissions website, that you're also checking out our financial aid website, because I think it's a good resource to be very comfortable with exploring and knowing, and then just seeing all the different forms that you can use there. So we've talked about financial aid, we've talked about the match process, we've talked about some of the resources that are on campus for students. So let's go to the next slide and just talk a little bit about advice in the process, talk a little bit about applying to Yale, talk a little bit about being a student at Yale. And I'll see, and I'm also going to pull up some of the questions that have come up. I see that Davine has even asked, can you talk about what Yale is looking for in choosing applicants to be admitted? Absolutely. And on our admissions website, on the upper right-hand side, there's a whole section, advice to candidates, including a page that even says what Yale looks for. But rather than saying, just go look at that, let's tell you a little bit about what our application process is like. And this is regardless of whether a student is applying through the match, a student's applying early action, or regular decision. When we are considering applications and thinking about this incredible community that we have here on campus, we're reading applications and trying to get to know a student, trying to think about things like, well, who is this student? Not surprisingly, by the time we're done reading a student's application, we'd like to have a little bit more of a sense of who they are, what's meaningful to them, what's been important to them, what have they experienced in their life that's maybe shaped their worldview or shaped why they're thinking about pursuing different things. There's a lot that we can get to know about you throughout your application. Now, no, you will not be able to share everything about yourself in the application. Don't even try to share everything about yourself. But think about, instead of thinking about, well, what does Yale want to hear? Or what do admissions offices want to hear? Always think more in terms of, you know what? I'm a pretty great person. You're all pretty great. This is what's important enough for me to share with the admissions office. If they're going to get to know me, here's what I want them to know about me. And that's what you should think about in answering your questions. So we think about things like, who is this person? We think about, what's this intellectual curiosity? What's ticking up here? What's this love of learning? And I don't want you to think that means, well, that's only the valedictorian or that's only perfect test scores. No, we're thinking about this love of learning. We're thinking about this excitement for deep academic exploration. Yale University is this research university where scholarship is happening in just about every field that you can imagine. And our undergraduates have access to resources. It might be something like the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library, where you have collections of letters, books that are hundreds of years old, that our undergraduates are able to go in and just explore and use for their classes. We have 1,200 labs in which students can pursue research opportunities. Our undergraduates are able to pursue research opportunities. We want students who look at the fact that we have 2,000 courses offered each and every year, and they get excited by the idea of, wait, I don't only have to take courses in my major. I can take courses because this is something that's always sent me down the Wikipedia hole, or this is something that I've always want to learn more about. We want students to get both depth within whatever program of study they pursue, but we also expect our students to have academic range. And we look for that demonstrated love of learning, that love of exploration in application. So, first, who is this person? Two, what's ticking up here? But two big questions have guided our admissions review for years. The two big questions are, what potential do we see for this student to make a significant positive impact? Whether in the Yale community, in their residential college community, around campus, around New Haven after they graduate from Yale. So we think about this positive impact. And then we also think about, what potential do we see for this student to take advantage of all of these resources that we have to offer? We want students that are going to come here, and maybe you know exactly what you want to study. And hey, if you've met the prerequisites for a course, you are absolutely eligible to register for that course. We want students who are going to take academic risks. We want students who might say, you know what, that might have been the hardest class I've ever taken, but my goodness, I love the material. The professor was so dynamic. I'm totally taking that next class. We want students to come here and think about abroad opportunities. And yes, there is significant funding set aside for students to be able to have at least one international opportunity if they so choose during their time at Yale. So as we're reviewing applications, as we're listening to the words that your teachers tell us, and your teachers will tell us about things like, yes, your academic strength in the classroom, but also that impact that you had in the academic community. Because yes, at our most basic, we are an academic institution. So we think about, what would the student be like as a peer, as a classmate, and we look for what your teacher talks about. Maybe you're the student who might not be the loudest student in the classroom, but when you raise your hand, everyone starts taking notes. Everyone dials in a little bit more because you take this discussion into a really new and exciting direction. Or maybe you're the student that the material might come a little more naturally to you, but you're helping everyone else around you understand the material. Maybe you're bringing like external materials into the classroom to help others understand. You're helping to make it a better learning environment for everyone else. We think about these questions. Who is this person? What's taking up here? What will they bring to our campus community? What will they take from our campus community as we're considering our applications? And we use every part of the application to go ahead and answer those questions. What are some reasons we may not match? That's another great question. There are a couple of different reasons why a student may not match. One, just like we can't admit every incredible student who applies to Yale, we can't match with every student with whom we might want to match with. First of all, it might be that another school was ranked higher than us. right? And they ended up matching with you. It might be that, yes, your parent share wasn't zero. It might be that, you know what, we didn't get all the information we needed to make a final decision, but that's okay. We have some more time if the student didn't match. I don't want you to think, well, if I don't match, is that, a reflection of me? Did I do something wrong? The match is not the end all be all. The match is really just the beginning of the application cycle. But if a student doesn't match and they don't match anywhere else, we will continue to consider that student in the regular decision process. I will say that also goes for if a student applies early action or regular decision. Always keep in mind that, if a student isn't admitted, it's not about what did I do wrong or no, it's simply, unfortunately, we simply do not have enough spots for as many students as we'd like to admit. Our incoming first year class is 1,550 students approximately every year. I think this year's class is right there at 1,557. Last year, we received over 50,000 applications to Yale. And if you ask just about any admissions officer, I think year to year, we will always remember students that we had hoped we would have room to admit them, we could have admitted them, and we're not able to. But the end of the day, the fact that you are connected to a program like QuestBridge, where you have access to 48 different partner schools, but the fact that you're even engaging with the college process in some ways, maybe even earlier than people that might be submitting their application November 1 or January 1st. You are thinking about this application process to so many different incredible schools that you are going to have a lot of fantastic options come March and come April. Yale might be one of those options. You might even say, sure, Yale's one of those options, but I found another school that was the better fit for me, and that's well within your right. Um, you would like to know, someone asked, I would like to know who and how our applications are reviewed. So I will answer the who of reviews your applications because I just talked a little bit about how our applications are reviewed. And I'm also going to put a plug in. If you are not familiar with the Inside Yale Admissions podcast, get familiar with it because there are a lot of fantastic episodes that talk about every part of the process from how we consider extracurriculars, how we consider recommendations, how we consider there's a whole episode related to the match. And we're even joined by the one of the founders of QuestBridge, Anna Rowena Malari, who talks a little bit about the QuestBridge program also. But who reviews your applications? I do. A bunch of my fabulous colleagues do. We typically review applications as area officer. So I will say I am the area officer for all applicants from Manhattan. And in that role, I'm the main liaison between students in Yale, high schools in Yale. And typically, if a student decides to apply early action or regular decision, I'm the person who is presenting. But applications are read by a variety of admissions officers. And then the committee isn't a one person deal or a two-person deal. There are multiple admissions officers who are a part of our different committees. And then we are even joined by some of our colleagues across the Yale College Dean's office. Some of our Yale College Deans join us in committee to help us think about these questions of who would the student be like as a student on our campus, as a classmate, as a peer? We might have a residential college dean that joins us. We might have one of our cultural center deans. We might have one of our deans who oversees, say, some of our bigly programming. Because in this whole person review, we even want different perspectives within the committee room too. It's not a mechanical process by any means. And again, that's why I thank you in advance for not sending like 9 million different recommendations because who's reading them? Your admissions officers are reading them. Let's see, a couple of other questions because, time flies when you are having fun. Um, Justin, this is a great question too. What is the best way to answer Yale supplements? The best way to answer Yale supplements is honestly and thoughtfully. And that, I mean, that goes for any college that is asking for supplements because, yes, colleges choose what additional questions they are going to ask you. But with the supplements, again, the written parts of the application are the only parts of the application where you decide what we ultimately learn about you. So I want you to take some time, and you might be thinking, Maura, we don't have all that much time. Well, I recognize that. But take some time to again think about what's important enough for me to share with Yale. What's important enough that I want to share with an admissions officer if they're going to get to know me, if they're going to get to know what's been meaningful to me, if they're going to think about me as a classmate or as a peer, like this is what I want them to know. Sometimes there's just an assumption, well, Yale wants to hear it in a specific voice. We want to hear it in your voice. And maybe you've heard this before that the test of, well, is it really your voice, that if you were to type up the essay or the supplement and not put your name on it and drop it on the floor, a friend of yours or a teacher could pick it up and read it and say, oh, I know exactly who wrote that, because that means that your voice is in there. You should also take some time to absolutely edit, to absolutely proofread. It's not enough just to hit proofread in your Microsoft Word, because sometimes this word might be spelled correctly, but it's not the correct word. But just take some time. You might be the kind of person that just wants to read the essay out loud to yourself, but this is your opportunity to make sure we know what you want us to know about you. Okay. A question came in about, are we able to have interviews with Yale in the period before December 1st? For the QuestBridge match, if we are offering students interviews, it will be in the next few weeks, because the match is released, the results are released on December 1st. So the interviews will happen in the coming weeks. That's another reason why I have to reiterate, whatever email address you put on your application, make sure you are checking that email address, daily. I won't say check it multiple times a day, because you have school to go to, you have family responsibilities to deal with, you have clubs and sports, other things to do. But make sure you are checking your email, because you will get important messages. If we're looking for additional information, if you're being offered an interview, it will be to that email. Also, make sure that if you haven't added at yale.edu to your safe list, that you go ahead and do that, just so our messages aren't going to a spam folder. If you are sitting here and thinking, you know what, she mentioned there are a couple of emails about my application status portal, but I don't think I've received those yet. Check your different folders, check your spam folder. If you're in Gmail, sometimes there's that primary inbox, but then the other inbox. Just make sure you are checking all of those, because lots of emails will come through that way. Okay, it looks like we have a little bit of time. Oh, there's a question. Oh, I think it's being typed in. If we match in December, can we visit Yale before Bulldog Days? Now, Bulldog Days is our admitted student program that's typically held in April, and we make sure we have funding for our QuestBridge matches, and for students who even have an EFC below a certain amount. So regardless of whether or not for QuestBridge, we are able to help fund admitted students to come see Yale. If you want to see Yale on your own before Bulldog Days, I highly encourage using a lot of our virtual tours, unless it's an easy trip for you to come out here. I don't want you to think you have to rush on out here to get here. But there are opportunities. If you're thinking about visiting Yale, I encourage you to look at our admissions website to see, well, what opportunities in person might be available those days. Also, it's good to see, depending on the academic calendar, is it a time of year where there are lots of students on campus, or is it a time of year where lots of students are home for the holiday break or for the winter break? Let's see. Um, there's a question about, you know, English isn't my first language, so my SAT English score is slightly below the 25th percentile. Does Yale consider the fact that I'm a non-native speaker if I do decide to submit the score? We're going to look at every part of the application. Remember, like anything that you submit to us, we will consider it. But often there's this assumption that the testing's like the end all be all. I will reiterate, We are test optional for this year. The testing is one moment in time. It is a 3-hour exam that maybe you take during the school day, maybe you take on a Saturday. And that's not going to give us nearly as much information as we need to really think about these questions of who's the student, what's sticking up here, what will they bring to our campus community, what will they take from our campus community. Keep in mind, it is ultimately your decision if you want to submit the testing or not. So if you feel like, hey, look, I am proud of the score, I want Yale to know about it, let us know about it. The QuestBridge application, as long as you filled out this part of it, you are able to let us know things like, well, my primary language at home is this. My first language is actually this, and that's something that we are able to consider in this whole person review. Let's see. The last question I think I will answer with respect to need line review. Our QuestBridge applications were viewed compared to the Common App. It has most of the financial info situation. Does that matter to the application reader? For QuestBridge, yes, sure, you filled out that financial information, but admissions readers, we are not financial aid officers, and we love partnering with with our financial aid office to help us know, is this student going to be, yes, zero parent share, or what is the financial aid award? But we are not looking at that as we're reading your application. We're looking at all the other parts of the application, from the things that you do outside of the classroom, to the recommendation, to your transcript, to the courses that you took, to your school context, thinking about, what does the strong student look like from this school? What was available to the student at this school? We are not sitting there figuring out what all that financial aid documentation is. We leave it to our incredible colleagues over at Student Financial Services. So unfortunately, just like that, we are out of time. But you can see some of the different resources that were dropped in the chat, and one more resource that I'm just going to make sure that you all have: admissions.yale.edu. You can find everything from advice to candidates, to you can find videos from our virtual multicultural open house programs that even have open houses with our first generation, the community initiative for first generation low income students. So you can even watch a virtual panel with them too. And my fabulous colleague has dropped the contact us page information here. So if you have follow-up questions, feel free to reach out. But we are so happy that you were able to join us this evening. We hope we were able to answer a lot of your questions, and we really look forward to meeting you in your application. I wish you all the best. I wish you a happy, healthy couple of weeks, and good luck, seniors. You're going to continue to be fabulous, and we just can't wait to get to know you. Take care, everyone. Thanks for coming. Have a good night.